אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. 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 עזרי מעם אדוני עושה שמיים וארץ. אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where, oh, where does my help come from? I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where, oh, where does my help come from? You know my help, it comes from God who made heaven and earth. Esa einai el harim, me'ayin yavo
Asher malach b'terem yitzir nivra le'ed nasa v'chefzo kol azay melech shemo nikra.
Levadorim lo nora.
Vet sur hevli, Esa enai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri. 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 Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz. Esa enai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri. I lift up my eyes to the mountain. Where, oh, where does my help come from? I lift up my eyes to the mountain. Where, oh, where does my help come from? You know my help, it comes from God who made heaven and earth. Esa enai el heharim me'ayin yavo
welcome to the CBHT Speakeasy, which I will say I know this is not technically a speakeasy, but I like the whole idea of underground society, and that is definitely what we've become in doing this workshop together. Tonight we have some amazing performances coming your way, some wonderful stories, and if you are at home, just know that everyone here in the sanctuary has not heard every bit of the story either, so it'll be a first for everyone. I do also want to let anyone at home know, as well as anyone here, that these stories are beautiful, funny, deep, sad, inspirational, and incredibly important. So please be aware that we will be talking about subjects that rotate around death or suicide ideation, 9/11, war stories. And I also want to say, in giving that warning, that it's my hope that you listen and sit with that story because it's amazing, and I can't think of a single one that won't speak to your heart in some way, shape, or form. So every time we get together, I light a candle, and what is fun for me when I'm doing other workshops, I usually have to explain the importance of a candle and what Shabbat candles mean for me. And in this group, I never have to, so it's kind of nice. But we light a candle every time to signal that we are moving into a creative space. This is a safe and sacred space, and it is a place where we are well aware and have promised to each other to do everything that we can not to hurt each other in any way. And so I'm asking, if you are online, please feel free to comment. Please feel free to leave them messages and encouraging messages. And also, please don't even try to say something mean. So I just want to make that very clear. So, as we move into this space together, I will light the candle, and then we will get started with our first reader. Okay, up first is Nat. And everyone here, please feel free to make all kinds of noise when people are finished. And people at home, you will know they were finished when you hear noise.
The first time I met her, she said, "Don't worry, dear, I'm not going to change a thing." I was sitting at the dinner table with my dad when I was 17 years old, and I said, "You know, next year you're going to be sitting here all by yourself. Maybe you should think about trying to find someone to share your life with." So he then went out and married the first Jewish woman he was introduced to, Selma. I had a bad feeling about her, but decided, of course, to be cordial for my father's sake, and I should have trusted my instincts. So the first thing she did was she came into the house. She got rid of the housekeeper who'd been living with us for 5 years, who I called Nana, and she'd been with us since my mom died and my sister left for college 3 weeks later. Then there was our kitchen. It was blue and peaceful and beautiful, and she came in and painted it yellow and brought in yellow plastic furniture. She took away the kitchen table where we'd had all of our meals, and I did my homework my whole life. Then I was told I wasn't allowed to come in the front door because I was dirty from the barn, and so I was made to come in the back door of my house. Then there were the wonderful elaborate meals that she would make that would take me hours to clean up from, taking time away from school, work, and friends. So eventually I just stopped going home for dinner, and I slept at friends' houses mostly the whole last year of high school. But then there was the wedding. I was told I had to be in my stepsister's wedding. I was told that I had to miss my horse show. Now, I had raised this horse up from being little, and from May to October, we would show every weekend and gain points, and at the end, there'd be a wonderful banquet, and there'd be trophies and ribbons and pictures of us. And because my dad didn't go to the shows, he never saw me ride like that and pick up ribbons, and he wasn't there the day I won the High Point Trophy for the whole show, which I'd never done before, and it was on Father's Day. So I made a suggestion, hey, why don't I go to the beginning of the show, and then I promise I'll come home and go be in this stupid wedding. And she said no, and my dad actually stood up for me and said, yes, as long as you're here on time. And I was raised properly, so I would be home on time. So I went to the show, did the beginning. I was dreadful. The horse was upset. A friend showed him the rest of the time, but I was home, took my shower, put on the orange floor-length bridesmaid dress. So I'm getting ready, and she says, you must put on orange lipstick. I don't wear makeup. I certainly don't wear lipstick, and orange I thought was pretty atrocious. But anyway, yes, I did it. So then I get to the facility, and I'm walking down the aisle in this horrible long orange dress with yellow satin stripes, by the way, and I'm tottering on high heels, of course. And people start looking at me, and then more people are turning around to look. And then there's kind of a murmur in the place. And then I got to the front and I walked by her, and she's got a smile glued on her face. The woman that said she wouldn't change anything and had absolutely changed everything. But you see, as I walked down the aisle, I wafted horse. Because before I left the horse show, I took handfuls of manure and I massaged it into my waist-length, long, black, curly hair. It seemed like the right thing to do. So now I do trust my instincts, and I know I can stand up for myself whether anybody else does or not, and just be warned.
Thank you, Nat. I think that's one of the more brilliant revenge tactics that I've ever heard. Up next is Stacy Cohen, who could not be here this evening, but she will be represented by Cindy Filer. And that once she's finished doing Stacy's, then Cindy will also share hers.
You Are Heard by Stacy Cohen. There he stood with a distant stare in his solemn eyes, his lips gaping at the view. Buildings had collapsed and emergency personnel were everywhere. It was a hard view for sure, difficult to watch for everyone. It was chaotic, scary, and sad. The smell wasn't pleasant either. It reminded you of smoke and wet sod mixed with chemicals and death. Lots of death. Responders were scurrying in every direction, tense from the hardest work they had ever done, but driven by their mission to save lives. Yet there he stood, quiet, defiant, and moody. He did not want to be there. I was warned about his unpleasant disposition by the others in the group. He snapped at everyone and had a permanent scowl on his face. He was an older man with white hair and the usual middle-aged stomach. He wore a collared shirt with his business's logo displayed in the usual spot. His biting tongue divulged no secrets and won him no friends. Well, at least not yet. He was sad and angry and mean. Those with him seemed to think very little of him. They walked in dismissively in front of him, completely ignoring his solemn eyes. I wondered how his situation had become so erroneous and bitter. I tried to stay away from him, as did everyone else. It was September the 15th. 4 days had passed since the whole world changed in the blink of an eye. 2 towers had fallen, and the city cried. It cried each day that no one from the debris was pulled out alive. The sadness permeated and overtook more than the city. The horrible attack lasted but a few hours and changed the trajectory of everyone responding to surveying the scene. Nothing was the same. No one there would ever be the same. We would each have a story. It was the largest emergency response in U.S. history, and I was part of it. It was a surreal moment for me. Growing up, I had never considered I would be part of the FBI and participating in one of our history's most defining moments. It was September 15th, and my job was to do whatever needed to be done to accomplish whatever task was at hand. As with most responses to disasters, there was no organizationally defined role or responsibility. We just did whatever needed to be done, and in that moment, I was to escort the group towards the center of the destruction so that they could verify that their airplane was lost. For them, it was an insurance claim. Silly, I thought. Wasn't the 24-hour news cycle enough? We had walked 2 blocks in what was once a great city, as if we were in the park for a stroll. Well, more like a march than a stroll, and it was still a great city, just different now, less secure. The fear of falling debris was real, so we walked in the middle of the road as we didn't need to worry about traffic. We stepped over bits of buildings and random papers as we walked. If you looked down, you would see business cards from those working inside the buildings and wonder if they made it. We stopped about a block or so from where the towers once stood, the closest we could get and still feel somewhat safe. We watched smoke billow from the crumbled buildings from fires that continued far below ground. None of this deterred the group and only seemed to make the man more bitter. The group was not particularly big, maybe 5 or 6 average-looking, middle-aged men. They all wore the same collared shirt with the airline logo design on the chest. They were friendly with each other and pleasant with me. They were more enthusiastic about being there than the man was. For them, it was an adventure, something they could talk about at future dinner parties. I could imagine one would proudly exclaim to their dinner party guests, "I was there." As we stood there looking at what was once Tower 1, or maybe it was Tower 2, we listened to the steady beat of police radios and cell phones ringing that would never be answered. The group surveyed the scene and discussed quietly what they were looking at. The devastation finally seemed to dampen their energy. The group grew quiet and slowly moved away, leaving the man standing there with obvious pain written all over his face. His eyes squinted and his mouth quivered. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. With the group gone, he felt free to speak. He didn't really speak to anyone in particular, but obviously needed to say his words out loud and be heard. He sadly stated, "We shouldn't be here." After a quiet pause, I looked questioningly in his direction. He responded by bowing his head and repeating, "We shouldn't be here. My friend was on that plane. He was the pilot." The long, quiet pause was deafening. He then elaborated and told me his story about how the airline had unnecessarily sent them to ground zero for the purpose of confirming damage to their airplane for insurance purposes. The damage to the planes was obvious, and a trip to ground zero, unnecessary. He was angry at his company for sending him to ground zero and disappointed in the group for using the situation as a disrespectful opportunity for future notoriety. His sorrowful glances towards me enunciated his pain and his need for understanding. I understood. He then turned his back to the scene and walked in the opposite direction from the group. The group resumed their chatty communication as we made our way away from the scene. I realized in that one quick moment, my interaction with the man allowed him to be seen and heard. He was human. The next story is titled My Friend Robin, and this is by me, Cindy Filer. You would have loved my friend Robin. She had a smile that could light up the room. Robin loved a good joke. She gave the best hugs, and she saved my life. Robin was the kind of person that when she and her husband built their house on the lot next to ours, sent a letter to every neighbor to let us know that they were being thoughtful about taking down the minimum number of trees, and the trees that they were taking down were going to good homes. I couldn't have asked for a better neighbor. Our families bonded. Robin's son and my daughter were born just 7 days apart. We shared birthday parties. We built a path between our houses. On snow days, we would sled in each other's driveways. And then I would be in charge of the hot cocoa, and then we'd go to Robin's house for dinner. For 4th of July, we would set off illegal fireworks in Robin's driveway. She was brave. We never set any of her trees on fire, but we did come close once. Robin agreed to share a flock of chickens with me, and she raised those baby chicks in her shower for weeks until they were old enough to go into the coop in my backyard. We learned the hard way that you should not store chicken feed in your garage. But if you do store chicken feed in your garage, you had better not leave the door up because bears love chicken feed. And it turns out that you really can't chase off the bears, not even with the loudest illegal fireworks. But in secret, we loved that a family of bears had made their den on Robin's wooded lot. But Robin was more than a neighbor, and she was more than a friend. She was my mentor. You see, she started her cancer journey 3 years before I would start my own. But really, Robin's cancer journey began at the tender age of 13. When she was 13 years old, she lost her mother to ovarian cancer. As an adult, she would help her sister through not one, but 2 diagnoses of breast cancer. So when Robin turned 40 and her doctor recommended a prophylactic hysterectomy, she did it. And then at age 45, when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, she opted for a bilateral mastectomy and the most aggressive chemotherapy regimen. Robin was in remission when I received my own breast cancer diagnosis. She prepared me in a way that no doctor or nurse educator ever could. She warned me, "You had better clean the refrigerator before you start chemo because it's going to smell bad. Like open the door, take one whiff, and go throw up bad." After I finished my first round of chemo, I was glad I had cleaned the refrigerator. I called Robin and I said, "How did you do it? Because I don't want to go back for my next round." And she said, "Cindy, I know how you feel. I had those thoughts too. But then I heard my son singing." She knew exactly what I needed to hear, and I did go back. When our own children turned the tender age of 13, Robin developed bronchitis. Only it wasn't bronchitis making her cough. It was cancer. Her cancer was back. Robin told me the good news. And yes, she used those words, good news. She told me she didn't need to have any more surgery, and the doctor told her this time the chemo wouldn't make her feel so bad. That was my friend Robin, always looking on the bright side. And she shared that light with us by hosting a murder mystery dinner party. It was the kind of evening where I could take the path to Robin's house, check my worries at the door, stick to the script, and pretend everything was going to be all right. She gave us each a fancy name. She provided us with our character descriptions, and she had warned us that we had better show up in costume. Robin was just radiant in her costume of a sequined dress and turban, playing the role of the all-knowing medium. She carefully crafted the entire evening, and we laughed and laughed. It was a glorious respite. Robin's cancer progressed, and when we asked her what we could do to help, she organized a community service day at Care Partners, where she had worked as an occupational therapist. She had us do trail maintenance on the path, where she had walked with her own patients as part of their therapy. Robin was too weak to walk the path with us, but she organized us from her chair in the Care Partners parking lot. We all pledged that every year for Robin's birthday, we would celebrate Be Like Robin Day with a day of community service. Robin accepted her new normals with grace. Like our last neighborhood stroll, when she couldn't catch her breath to walk very far. And our last hug, because the bone lesions made embracing too painful. Robin taught me that you can do everything right. You can do the preventative surgeries and the most aggressive treatments. And sometimes that just isn't enough. Sometimes the only thing that you can do is to live each and every day fully. Robin wasn't religious, but she supported her son when out of the blue, he asked to go to church. Robin became good friends with the pastor and met with him to discuss her last